Well, hello and welcome back. And I actually came out today to the trail to test out a couple of items, one of which is this. This is the new or slightly updated Fox Ranger Wind Pullover. And the reason why I wanted to test this is because when I was down in Bellingham, I reviewed the Fox Ranger Fire jacket, which is this one here. And what really attracted me to the Ranger Fire jacket is because it has that built-in waterproof breathable membrane, that 10K membrane that they use in their like Ranger 3-layer jackets. However, this is going to be far too warm for springtime temperatures. And so the Ranger Wind Pullover is kind of a unique piece in that it is a soft shell type material. It's a 4-way stretch. It will inherently have a bit of a DWR, durable water repellent coating on it, but it is going to be much more breathable because it doesn't have that waterproof breathable membrane. However, today is super hot, and so the review on this particular piece is going to have to wait for another week. Nevertheless, there is something else I wanted to talk to you about, and that is in the little garage here, and it is this. This is the new Topeak D2X tire pressure gauge. So when it came to choosing a tire pressure gauge, I knew that I wanted to get a digital gauge, and Topeak actually makes two. They make one called the Shuttle Pressure Gauge Digital, and they have the new D2X. And I was looking quite closely at the features and benefits of each one, and to be honest, the Shuttle Pressure Gauge Digital has a couple of really cool features that this doesn't have. So the shuttle is actually designed so that you can attach it to the press valve on the tire, and then you can come in on the other side and you can attach a pump, and you can actually like inflate with the actual pressure gauge attached so that you don't have to constantly be sort of swapping between the two. What the shuttle pressure gauge has that this one sort of doesn't is that it automatically detects any change in pressure. So as you are adding pressure through the attachment point on the back side, it will automatically detect that and give it in the readout in 0.5 psi increments. On the flip side, if you are depressing the air release valve, then it will automatically detect the drop in pressure and also display that in 0.5 psi increments. However, the Shuttle Gauge Digital does have a number of let's call them problems, and they're primarily central with the ergonomics. So while it does have a 360 rotating head like this one, it requires you to actually lock on the digital gauge onto that pressed valve for it to become seated. And oddly, they chose to put the lever on the right-hand side, which is a bit weird considering that 90% of the population is right-handed. So if you're holding the gauge in your right hand, it would be far more ergonomic to lock it with your left. Additionally, they put the air release valve on the backside, which requires you to sort of hold the gauge like this, which is a bit awkward. I think more people are apt to holding it on the side, and they can, depress a side button a lot easier, especially with the thumb. And last but not least, the battery compartment where this is nice and flush, that one has a deep hole. And so I have read reviews that it just doesn't fit super nice in the hand. Something else to consider with the Shuttle Gauge Digital is that on the back side, when you go to fill, all mountain bikes are going to be set up with a pressed valve. However, it is designed to fill with either a Schrader or a Presta. There's a Schrader adapter that I've talked about before in like the holiday gift ideas for mountain bikers video. It's just that little add-on that goes over top of the Presta. Well, unless you have your pump configured to Schrader where this pump is Presta only, then what you're going to have to do every time you use the gauge, if you want to use its inline feature, which is kind of the main benefit, then you're going to have to remove that Presta to Schrader adapter, which means now you're holding the rubber cap that sits on the back to protect it, any sort of dust ingress, but you're also going to have to hold the adapter and stuff those in your pockets. And so it kind of adds a bit of a friction point in the actual user experience. So the D2X Digital actually kind of seeks to improve on a lot of the friction points with the Shuttle Gauge Digital, albeit at the expense of not having that inline function. One of those benefits is the actual ergonomics, and we can break that down in a few ways. First and foremost, it is very, very thin compared to the shuttle gauge digital, which is quite thick, and that makes it easy to insert into, like, you know, bags and pockets like we have here in the sort of garage section of the Thule round trip bike duffel. There's a video on this one as well. It's a great bag. Something else it does, or has, I should say, is on both sides there is rubberized strips, which really makes it nice and grippy to hold in the hand. It does feature the same 360-degree head, and you don't have to sort of add and remove adapters or like rubber fill plugs to change between Presta and Schrader. You just flip the top like this. Now, to be totally honest with you, every mountain bike is going to use a Presta adapter anyways, so I really don't see the benefit to having the Schrader. I mean, I do have a BMX Schrader, but I'm not too concerned when it comes to, you know, my BMX tire pressures. One other feature that this has that the Shuttle Digital doesn't is a backlit LCD screen, and I can tell you, using it out here in the sunlight, it actually really does make quite the difference. It's much easier to read. Now, it also has relocated the bleed from the back, which, you know, again, as mentioned, is kind of like an awkward way to hold it, up onto the side. I think I would put forth, that is to say, that most people are going to want to test or fill with the actual valve of the tire on the top, so you aren't bending all the way over to the ground unless you have it up in a stand like this, which, if that's the case, then it positions the actual bleed valve with your thumb in a really nice ergonomic position, so you can just attach it vertically and then bleed it down. That's kind of where things don't go quite as well for the D2X though. So what you have to do is, if you just simply insert it, it's going to record that tire pressure, and if you were to bleed it, it's not going to change it unless you press this button up here in the top right hand corner, and this is the bleed function. I don't know why it doesn't automatically detect it, maybe so that you can remove it and look, but the whole point to the digital backlit screen is that you should be able to read it with it still on the bike, as well as the 360 head, so you can position it in a way that you can read it. It kind of gets a little bit worse. So once you set it to the bleed function, the PSI, or the, I should say, unit of measurement, so it's either PSI bar or I think it's like centimeters per something. I'll put it down below. All that starts flashing at a really kind of fast and awkward rate. Now, I interpret that as the sample rate. However, I don't need the whole, 25.5 to flash. It would be more than sufficient if, the PSI in the bottom left-hand corner flashed to indicate that I've changed modes, and it was just going to give me the down or up, whatever it's, sensing in terms of the actual pressures. And because it's flashing quite frequently, it does make it inherently difficult to read. So it's, on, off, on, off, on, off, and it's also cycling through numbers. So it might jump up and jump down. And I find that actually, quite difficult and almost a bit disorienting. Nevertheless, the actual, function and form of the D2X, I think, is 100% worth it. I like the fact that you don't have to, swap out anything, and it is quite easy to use, but there is a bit of a pro tip, and I'm gonna show you on the bike what that looks like. All right, so I'm gonna start by removing my valve cap for the PD's valve. So I'm just gonna set that down here on the bike rack. We're gonna go ahead and press the on button to turn the unit on, we have it set in the Presta configuration. Typically, with most digital gauges, I find even if you just kind of crack the actual locking collar here on the valve stem, it's sufficient for you to kind of come in and get a reading. But what you'll see here is it doesn't. It kind of leaks air and it sort of skips around a little bit. And what I have found is that if you go ahead and back this all the way off and then go and actually insert it, it makes a much better connection and a much better seal. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that you've created a wider flat surface, which pairs and interfaces a lot better with the actual convex, arguably, brass component here of the actual pump. What I recommend is just go ahead and unscrew this all the way so that you can actually just get it up, no leaking of air, and it doesn't kind of skate around on the actual valve stem itself. So I'm not the kind of person who would ever carry a digital pressure gauge or even just a pressure gauge in general with me on the trail, but I can appreciate the thinness and compactness that this pressure gauge delivers. I especially like it when I'm keeping it in the little garage component of this bag because it just makes everything that much easier to navigate around. Nevertheless, I can appreciate that, digital tire pressure gauges might seem like a bit of a boutique kind of item where, why would I spend the money when the, analog, readout one is, $5 at Canadian Tire, and that suits me just fine. In truth, that's what I had, planned on using, albeit those are designed for Schraders. So, being on a Presta, we are kind of forced into the mountain bike specific or cycling specific tire pressure gauges, which, kind of has a bit of a bike tax put on it. But in making the decision to go with a proper bike pressure gauge, I actually like knowing a lot more about what's going on with my bike. So as I, grow and evolve as a rider and as a, self-home kind of, service technician person, then I'll know, what pressures are working well for me, and I can, hopefully grow that experience and be able to translate that onto the actual trails that I'm riding. So having the specificity, especially going down to the 0.1 PSI, that's probably a lot more than anybody needs. Nevertheless, this can show it. And I think it's worth knowing. So if you have any particular questions about the Topeak D2X digital tire pressure gauge, let me know in the comments down below. I'd be happy to answer them. As things continue to evolve, then I will report back on them in the future. So in the meanwhile, thank you very much for watching. Definitely stick around if you're interested in the Fox Ranger Wind pullover with its cool kangaroo pouch on the front. When we get a cool overcast morning or day of riding, I'll definitely be putting that through its paces. So if you aren't already subscribed, please consider doing so. If you like what we're doing here, then I would greatly appreciate a thumbs up, and we'll see you in another one. You take care. Bye for now.